they done a wonderful job? Oh, this is a great privilege to see the kids participate here. I was greatly honored when they asked me to have the sermon today. And it's a great honor. But I want to talk to the young people here. Is it okay if the older people listen? Could they listen? Yeah, they said you could listen as well. But I'm going to be talking to the young people here. You know, God has a plan. And I want to talk about how his plan was revealed in several people in the Bible. So I want to get close to you. That's why I'm down here. So I want you to listen real closely, okay? Let's look at Noah. You know the story of Noah. God came to Noah and said, Noah, I want you to build an ark because it's going to rain and it's going to flood. I wonder what Noah first said. I think he might have said, Lord, what's rain? Because it never rained before. But he believed God. And so he built the ark according to the plan that God gave him. And it took him 120 years to build it. And during that 120 years, while people were building the ark, he was preaching. And he's telling them, listen, you need to reform. You need to go away from your evil ways. You need to follow God because he's going to send rain from heaven. And it's going to flood. And everybody's going to get killed. And everybody laughed at him. You know, I preached for 20 minutes and nobody remembers what I said afterwards. He preached for 120 years and they didn't believe him. And what happened? After the time was up, Noah and his family and the animals went into the ark. The angel came and he shut the door. And Noah and his family were the only ones saved out of all the people on the earth because they listened to God, because God had a plan. We think of Joseph. Joseph was the son of Jacob out of Rebekah. And Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. Remember, he made him a coat with all many colors on it. And he had dreams where his brothers were bowing down to him. And his brothers didn't like that. So when Joseph came to see his brothers one day out in the field, they said, here comes the dreamer. We're tired of listening to him. Let's get rid of him. Let's kill him. And Reuben said, no, let's not kill him. Let's put him in the pit. And then Reuben thought he'd pull him out later. But as he was in the pit, we had some travelers come through. And the brother said, you know what? If we pull Joseph out the pit, we sell him to these travelers, they'll take him down to Egypt. He'll be a slave, but we'll get rid of him. Plus, we'll get some money. It's a win-win situation. So they sold Joseph into slavery. He was about 17 years old. But you know, Joseph said, I'm always going to serve God. I'm not going to go away from God. And because of that, his life was such that Potiphar, who was his new owner, said, you know, this man's pretty special. I can trust him. And so he put Joseph in charge of everything in his house. But Joseph's wife wanted Joseph to do something bad. And Joseph said, no, I'm not going to do that. So she told Potiphar, Joseph did something bad. Potiphar really didn't believe her, but he had to, please her. So he had Joseph put in jail. So Joseph went from the favored son to a slave to the rule of Potiphar's house and back into jail. Do you think he got discouraged? I would have. Oh man, what's going to happen? I'm trying to serve God and this is what happens to me. But he also decided he would do the best he could while he's in jail. And he was such an influence that the jailer said, you know what? I can trust this man. I'm going to make him in charge of all of the jail. Wow, isn't that something else? And then one day, he saw that there was a couple of the king's servants in jail. And they'd had a couple dreams. And they said they were troubled. And Joseph said, well, tell me the dreams. I think my God can help me understand what the dream is, and I can tell you about the dream. And so they did. And one of the servants in 3 days was taken out of jail and was restored to his position in the king's court. The other one in the jail was taken out of jail in 3 days, but he was put to death because the king didn't like him for some reason. And Joseph said, when you go to the king, tell him that I'm in jail for no good reason. Somebody lied about me and I was put in jail. Ask him to have mercy on me. And the man said, yes, I'll do that. I'll tell the king what a good man you are. But you know what happened? He forgot. And Joseph then was in jail for another 2 years. But then the king had a dream. Actually, he had 2 dreams. And he didn't know what the dreams meant. And he was troubled. And suddenly, the servant that was being restored, the butler, said, you know what, O king? I met a man in jail who interpreted my dream. I bet you he can tell you what your dream is about too. So Pharaoh says, well, go bring him here quickly. So Joseph was brought before the king, and the king told him what his 2 dreams were, and Joseph, God can tell me what that was. You see, there's going to be 7 years of plenty. There's going to be so much food in this land, but then there's going to be 7 years where there's going to be very little food. There's going to be a famine. You know what would be good if you'd appoint a governor and that he would collect 1/5 of all the food during those 7 years of plenty. He'd put it up and he'd store it, and then in those 7 years of famine, he can share that food with others. Pharaoh said, you know what? That's a pretty good idea. I wonder who we can get to do that. You know what? I think you're the best person for it. God is with you. God has given you wisdom. God has given you prestige. I want you to be governor. So Joseph became the governor of Egypt, and he was able to save the people of Egypt from starvation. Not only that, but his father and his brothers came from the land of promise to Egypt because there's no food there. You see, God had a plan. Yes. And then we come to the story of Moses. Of course, Juvie did most of my story during the story hour, but that's all right. But Moses was in a basket in the Nile. He was seen by Pharaoh's daughter. He was raised in the court of Egypt. In the court of Egypt, he learned how to lead a large group of people because he's trained in the military. He's trained how to lead an army. He was trained how to provide food for the military. He was trained how to get people to follow and to do what they were supposed to do. But he knew that the time was close when God's people should be delivered because they were slaves in Egypt. And so he kind of thought, maybe God's appointed me to do this, and I can do this. I'm a military man. I can do by might. I can deliver them. I can get them out of Egypt, out of slavery. But that wasn't God's plan. And he thought that he could do it, and he killed an Egyptian that was fighting with a Hebrew. And then because of that, he had to flee, and he went into the wilderness, and he met a man named Jethro, and he started taking care of Jethro's sheep. And then he saw Jethro's daughter and said, she's a pretty nice-looking lady, and he married her. And so now he's taking care of his father-in-law's sheep. He went from a slave baby to the courts of Egypt, to the wilderness where he had to take care of somebody else's sheep because he had nothing on his own. But it took him 40 years to learn the way to lead people and the things of Egypt. And it took him another 40 years in the wilderness to learn to trust God totally. And when that was accomplished, God sent him back to Egypt. And he said, well, God, I stutter. I can't talk very well. God says, don't worry, I'm going to send Aaron, your brother, and he's going to help you. And so they went to the Pharaoh, and you know the story about Pharaoh didn't want to let the people go, and there are many plagues. But finally, Pharaoh let the people go. And so with his knowledge gained in Egypt and his knowledge of his dependence on God in the wilderness, he's able to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt and into the wilderness. And because of their sins, they had to stay in the wilderness for 40 years. But God had a plan. He prepared Moses to be the leader of the children of Israel coming out of Egypt. You see, God always has a plan. And then we have the story of Esther. How many of you remember the story of Esther? You remember the story of Esther? Yeah, I see a few hands. That's good. But you see, it's not only men that God has a plan for. God has a plan for ladies as well. Esther, she lost her mommy and daddy at an early age. She was an orphan. She went to live with her uncle, Mordecai. And Mordecai was in the king's court. This is a tough one. Ahasuerus was the king. And Mordecai was there. And he came back one day as Esther had grown up. She was a young teenager. And he says, you know what? The queen displeased the king, and he kicked her out of the palace. And now he's looking for another queen. He's going to hold a beauty contest. And he's going to have all the young ladies from the kingdom come in. And then he's going to look at them, and he's going to decide who he wants to be queen. You know what? You're a beautiful young lady. Why didn't you join the beauty contest? Well, she didn't want to do it at first, but Mordecai finally convinced her. And she went. And she was with all these young, beautiful ladies. And the king came, and he looked at all of them. And he looked and looked, and suddenly he stopped. He saw Esther. She was the most beautiful lady in the room. He says, that is who I want to be queen. And so an orphan young lady of Jewish descent became the queen of the kingdom of Persia. And that was pretty good. She felt pretty good. But Mordecai was a minister, was one of the servants of the king that stood in the gate of the city. And one of the great people that served the king, his name was Haman. As he would come in and out of the gate, everybody else would bow to him like he was a god. But Mordecai wouldn't do it. That made Haman real mad. And so he went to the king and he says, King, you know, you got a group of people here that really don't bow to us. They don't follow us. We ought to do something about it. We ought to make a decree that they should all be killed. The king thought, well, that would be pretty good, so he did that. But he didn't realize that his queen was also a Jewish lady. And so when he made a decree to kill all the Jews, that meant they could kill his queen. And she heard about that, and, oh, what am I going to do? The king has made a decree that people could come and kill me and all my people and all my friends and all my family. What am I going to do? So she spoke to her uncle Mordecai, and Mordecai said, you know what? God may have put you in the kingdom for such a time as this. This might be why you are here. You need to go and speak to the king. And she says, oh man, I can't do that. The law was, unless the king called you into his throne room, you didn't go in on your own. But if you really wanted to take a chance, you could go to the door of the throne room. If the king lifted up his eyes and saw you, if he held out his scepter, you could come and touch it and you're okay. But if he didn't hold out his scepter, the guards would take you away and they'd kill you. And Esther said, I don't know if I can do that. Mordecai encouraged her, so she prayed about it. So one day, she went and stood in the doorway of the king's throne room. The king was talking, then he looked up and he saw his beautiful queen. He held out his scepter, and she came and touched it. And he says, what can I do for you, my queen? So, oh, I'd like you and Haman to come and have supper with me. Oh, I'd love to do that. And so the next day, they came and they had a supper feast with Esther. And the king says, what else can I do for you? He says, why didn't you and Haman come back again tomorrow? And I'll talk to you some more. So that's what they did. They came, and Haman was feeling pretty good. I'm having dinner with the king and the queen. Whoa, what a good man I am. But the next day, when they came to supper, the king says, Esther, my queen, what can I do for you? She says, oh, Lord, my king, you've made a decree that you are going to kill all the Jewish people. That means I'm going to be killed because I'm Jewish. The king was so distraught about this, he didn't know what to do. He says, who convinced me to do that? Who made this decree? He says, this wicked man Haman right here. The king was so mad that he told Haman to go out, and Haman was hung. And the king then made another decree and said, oh, the Jewish people could now fight to protect themselves. And God protected them. You see, God had a plan. Peter. I love Peter. My brother's named Peter, and I've always said he was named aptly because he's impulsive too. Because Peter was impulsive. He would do things before he thought about it. I always thought that Peter's creed in life was open mouth and short foot because he got himself in trouble so many times. But Peter thought that he was the great defender of his Lord Jesus. He really believed Jesus was the Son of God, and he said that he would do anything to protect him. But he failed so many times. And then at the Last Supper, as they were having the final supper before they went to the Garden of Gethsemane, and then Jesus was arrested, Jesus was telling the disciples, all of you are going to desert me before this night is over with. Peter says, no, Lord, I won't. I'll go to jail for you. I'll even die for you. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to protect you. And he kind of proved that when he took his sword out and cut off the ear of the high priest's servant when they tried to arrest him. And then Peter was only one of the two disciples who have followed Christ into the judgment hall and was there to see what happened to Jesus. But as Peter was at the fire warming his hands, a young lady said, Peter, you with Jesus, aren't you? And what did Peter do? Denied him. Now, Jesus said, you can deny me 3 times before the night is over. And Peter says, no, I won't. He denied him that time. Then another time somebody said, yes, I know you with him. I saw you with him. No, and he denied him again. And then somebody said, yes, you're with Jesus because your speech betrays you. You see, how we speak tells a lot about us, doesn't it? And they said, no. Peter said, no, I'm not with him. He started cussing and swearing. No. And then he looked up, and Jesus was coming from one hall to the other. And Jesus looked at him, and Peter saw the look of love and compassion in Jesus' eyes. And it says, Peter went out, and he wept bitterly. From that point on, he gave his life totally to Jesus. He put self aside, and he became a tremendous leader in the church, performed many miracles. So it is, you see, God had a plan for Peter. The impulsive Peter, who always got himself in trouble, God had a plan to do something different with him. Then I think of Paul. His name was Saul at the time. He was a rising star in the religious community in Israel. He was a member of the Sanhedrin. He was trained to be a Pharisee. He was on his up way. He was very intelligent. He was really a rising star. And when they were stoning Stephen, because they said Stephen was a heretic, Saul was there holding his clothes, and he believed in the stoning of Stephen. But then on the road to Damascus, you remember the story? He's on the road to Damascus, a bright light shone, and he heard the voice of Jesus saying, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And at that time, he got converted. He realized Jesus was the Son of God. And he was blind when the light went away. And 3 days later, Ananias came and he restored his sight by praying over him. And Saul became a great missionary, a great evangelist for Christ. See, God had a plan for him. But there's one plan we haven't talked about. Does anybody think of what that plan is? One plan we haven't talked about? The plan of salvation. See, Adam and Eve were created perfect. They were created perfect into a perfect world, but then they chose to sin. When Jesus came down to talk to them that evening, as he usually did in the evening, they hid from him. He had called out to them, says, Adam, Eve, where are you? Where are you? I don't see you. They heard a voice crying, we're here, but we're naked and we're afraid. They'd never been afraid of God before, but because they had sinned and eaten the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they were now afraid. And so Jesus called them out. He made some clothes for them out of animal skins. And he says, I have a plan. Yes, you've chosen to go against me. You've chosen to rebel. But I have a plan to restore you back. I have a plan of salvation. I will be coming to earth, and I will be giving my life for you. That is the greatest plan that God ever had. God had a plan of salvation already in place before Adam and Eve sinned. And because of that plan, we can be restored and we can be saved and we can go to heaven. But you know, there's one other plan we haven't talked about. That's the plan he has for each one of you. Every one of you, God has a plan for. He knows exactly what he wants you to do for him. Jeremiah sent a letter to the captives in Babylon, and in that, as he wrote the letter based on what God told him, he did this verse, and this pertains to us today. It's Jeremiah 29:11. For I know what I have planned for you, says the Lord. I have plans to prosper you, not to harm you. I have plans to give you a future filled with hope. So what is God's plan for you? There's a different plan for each one of you. Each one of you has a plan that is tailored specifically for you. But there's a foundation to each plan. You know what a foundation is, right? It's what you build on. The foundation for God's plan for each one of us is found in Mark 12:30 through 31. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. This is the first commandment. And the second like it is that you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. So the first plan that God has for you is to love him with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul, with all your strength. And when you love God that way, you will love your neighbor as yourself. That's the foundation to build on. But then as you grow, as you get older, as you continue to ask God what his plan for you is, he will share that with you. And he will give you an idea what he wants you to do. His plan might be that you are going to be a truck driver, but you can talk about Jesus with those that you meet as you travel. The plan may be that you're a cook and you open a kitchen and you share with God's love to those that come to the kitchen. You definitely don't want me to be part of that, but some of you could be a good cook. It might be that God's plan for your young ladies is to be a mother. Just like Jochebed, the mother of Moses, taught Moses about God from an early age, so it is that you as a mother can talk to your children about God and train them up in the way they should go. It might be that God calls on some of you to be a preacher, and you can preach and reach millions of people through your preaching. It doesn't matter what the plan that God has for you is. Whatever he has for you is the best for you because he has your best interest in heart. So as you grow, ask God to share with you what his plan for you is. And whatever his plan is, make sure that you follow it. And how do you follow it? By asking God to give you the strength to do what needs to be done. There's a saying that God's will never send you where his grace cannot sustain you. Whatever he asks you to do, he will give you the power to do it because you're doing it in his name. So remember, God has a plan, and his plan is the best plan there ever is. Thank you.